Hey guys, this is Insurance and Finance live from the headquarters of Digital Scouting in Hamburg, Germany. Today we have a very special guest. We have on our Superstar series, Guy Kawasaki, co-worker of Steve Jobs, founder, investor, best-selling author, and chief evangelist of our favorite design tool for sure, Canva, and podcast host of the Remarkable People's Podcast. Guy, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We ask everybody in our show outside of the industry the following.
Yes.
So, how do you buy insurance policies, and what kind of role does insurance play in your life? And don't worry, we can take a lot.
I have been using Allstate for about, 40 years or so. So I have all my life insurance, my auto insurance, my, residential property, basically everything with Allstate.
It's an interesting question, an interesting topic, not because it's like the insurer. There are a lot of great insurers out there, but they are at one. Probably you would get a dime or two somewhere cheaper. Why are you staying with one?
Because in the past, when I have filed claims, the claims have been fast and generous.
I think right now, somewhere in Allstate headquarters, people are putting the champagne bottles up. But I think it's interesting to know, because in the insurance industry, we have the discussion about, will the agent die? Will the big brands die?
Yeah.
And we have different customer types. And I'm the same. I'm super digital with everything, but I have Wolfgang. Wolfgang has all my policies, and I just go to him. Give me your best offer. So so Wolfgang of Allianz is my Allstate. All right. I know you have maybe been asked this question already 27,000 times, but I could not resist from asking you it too. But we will get then to the even more exciting stuff. So you have worked for Apple, it's no secret, and Steve Jobs. What was like the biggest things you take away from these times, actually?
Well, there were a lot to learn from Steve Jobs. A couple things that I learned that were the most important is, first, that customers can't necessarily tell you how to create an innovation or a revolution. They can tell you that they want better, faster, cheaper, whatever they're already getting, but they can't tell you how to create a Macintosh. So they would tell you better, faster, cheaper Apple II, but not describe a Macintosh, because it just wasn't in their wheelhouse to describe something they'd never even considered or seen. So that's number one. Number two, I think I learned that A players hire A players and B players hire C players, and ideally A players would hire A plus players, people not just equal to them but better than them. Yeah. So I learned that from Steve Jobs, and I also learned that elegance and minimalist design counts. Maybe not for everybody, but enough people care that design counts.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And by the way, you guys out there, when you're watching, don't hesitate, don't be shy, ask questions, even if you're using not an Apple. So don't worry, get your questions out there, don't be shy. There's a saying in Silicon Valley or in the US about you, and that says that guy has the golden touch. What does it mean? And do you have a tip for our audience?
Yeah, it doesn't mean what you might think it means. So it doesn't mean that whatever I touch turns to gold. Not at all, actually. What it means is that whatever is gold, Guy touches. And by this, I mean that the key to successful marketing, sales, and evangelism is not necessarily the sales, marketing, or evangelism, but what you're evangelizing, selling, and marketing. So my theory is that it's very easy to sell, market, and evangelize something great. It's very hard to sell, market, or evangelize crap. So, find, affiliate, or create something great, and all of marketing falls into place.
That's a great thing. The problem a lot of insurers, from big multi-billion-dollar companies to small insurers or banks and agents and brokers out there have, it's very difficult to estimate what is really a buzz, what's hype, what's really innovation, so what is your internal criteria when you analyze something and say, that's maybe worth becoming part of Guy's Golden Touch?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is, would I use it myself, or do I use it myself? Canva is an example of that. Macintosh, obviously, an example of that. But I feel your pain, because it is hard to know when you are in the presence of something great. But I'd say it's a little bit like pornography, which is, it's very difficult to define pornography. So, is a woman breastfeeding pornography, or is that a beautiful, maternal thing? And so, but it exposes the same breast. So I didn't mean to go down into this pornography.
Oh, keep it coming. As long as I'm not doing it, I can go home later to my wife. I won't be in trouble.
Yeah. But, so in a sense, pornography, the test is, it when you see it. And it's very difficult to describe and define. And I think great products are like that. It's very difficult to define, objectively. This is the checklist. But it when you see it.
So when I'm an insurance executive and I see 27,000 different pitches, and I have no excitement and no alarm bells go off, then it would be, I would know when I see it.
I think that's as good as it can get.
Okay.
Another proxy is, let's say you're an insurance executive and you're meeting with 27,000 startups. There's two tests, right? So one, does it move your pulse when you see it? And the second is, does the team come in and say, listen, we're a startup. We're two guys in a garage, two gals in a garage, a guy and a gal in a garage, and we're signing up 1,000 people a day. So in that sense, one of the proxies for a great product is that the dog, to use another metaphor, that the dogs are already eating the food. So, this is a case where, in the worst case, you may not think it's so great, but 1,000 people are signing up per day. You may be wrong. They may be right.
So it's on one hand, does it move the needle inside me as an expert, as a very subjective expert, and are there numbers that beat me? That's a good one. I like the combination because a lot of experienced executives, they have like this the idea, it doesn't move my needle, so it's probably not good. And I'm known as a rebel in the industry that rants on stages and tries to push things. And on the other hand, sometimes you have numbers that are so ridiculous, obvious. I mean, for example, TikTok, we have a discussion about TikTok in the insurance industry. Can we use it or not? I mean, like, it's the most downloaded app for 2 years around the world. Yeah. Maybe we should think about this, And just kidding.
Another test I would give you is that if you're a man, you could ask your wife, your spouse, because I think women have much better judgment when it comes to new products and services than men.
Okay, we maybe cut this out later, even though it's live, so I don't have to discuss with my wife again. Just kidding. And one thing that's super impressive, when I may say this, is your network. Your network it's like unbelievable, and you see this also in the guests of your podcast, the Remarkable People podcast. I mean, you had Ariana Huffington, Jen Goldal, Tim Kendall, Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, a common friend. Shout out to Gary, Steve Wozniak, and many, many more. And I listened to your podcast, to a lot of episodes. And what I find, it has a very special, calm, super valuable atmosphere.
Well, thank you.
No, really, really, really. It's like very special. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. Why did you start it, especially considering your track record, and how do you achieve this very special atmosphere?
Well, I started it. There's two reasons. One is I almost feel like I have a moral obligation because I have the ability, because of whatever, to get those kind of guests. So the ability to get those kind of guests is a very great honor. So if I can get them, and if I can get them to explain how they became remarkable, I think that is good for the world to hear that. So that's number one. Number two is, I would like podcasting. This is pre-pandemic. I would like podcasting to replace my business travel. So I'd rather sit in a studio and do podcasting than travel all over the world. I'm tired of traveling. So I haven't traveled. I haven't gotten on a plane since last March, and I am happy.
I did, but don't tell the government that I did.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I abide the law, of course. But again, I'm a really big fan of the podcast about this very special atmosphere, and it's a very interesting mix of different industries. So it's not only like one stream, but it's like AI, virologists, tech people. So it's super interesting mix. You're very sorry.
I'm curious. So you contrast my podcast with other podcasts. So let's say there was another podcast with sort of equal level guests. What do you say is different about their podcast from my podcast?
I have the impression, if I may say this, that you get the people to tell you things they would tell you at a glass of wine at an evening after, if you know them for some time, and they feel very, very comfortable. And it's like and they are valuable stories, valuable concrete things they say, and that's, in my view, makes your podcast so special. And that's a very calm atmosphere, and you ask, that's what I take away from this. And they share things they probably would have not shared, and they're never in a rush. They're never in a rush, even though they're all people that are super busy.
That's good to know. I like to hear what people perceive about my podcast. And one thing about it is, and it's quite purposeful, I think that the model for my podcast is it's 95% the guest and 5% me talking. And that's quite on purpose, because this podcast is about them. It's not about me.
Yeah, totally. But again, still, I also listened to podcasts you gave. So because I noticed that they talk that you give your guests a lot of space. So what I really also, maybe one step back, you are also a very sharp analyst of society, if I may say, in business and tech. And in one podcast, and I laughed a lot, but in a very positive way, you described the fight between the poor old New York Times and Lonely Boy 15 when it comes to launching products.
Yes.
What did you mean with that?
Yes.
And especially, what can the insurance and finance industry and sales take from this?
So my take on this is that it used to be a top-down world where people would listen to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, Der Spiegel, whatever it is, right? So they would think, the experts, the journalists are telling me what to buy, what to use, what to eat, what to read, what to ever. And I think that world is now upside down. That now what the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and journalists and analysts and so-called experts, what they do is they react to what Lonely Boy 15, the hypothetical, no name, no follower, 16-year-old kid is doing. And so, I don't think anyone predicted, any of these experts said, you got to get on Twitter. Twitter is going to be successful. I don't think any expert more recently said TikTok is the future of social media and interaction, right? So what happened was lots of people got on Twitter. Many people got on TikTok. And so the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the experts had to cover TikTok and Twitter because those products were being adopted. So they didn't cause the adoption. They reported on the adoption. And if you believe in this theory, then the key to great PR and coverage and journalism is that you have a successful product, not that you suck up to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal.
Wow. All right. And for large incumbents and large corporations, it's super hard to really adapt to innovation and these changes and these shifts in society. What you described is just a dramatic shift. And by the way, I'm a funny byproduct, or Gary said, I'm a funny byproduct of this shift too, because like an insurance nerd 7 years ago, I was selling insurance policies on the street. Like I have 28 bosses and no one below me, and now I'm like this insurance guy around the world. Really funny story, because I started social media and actually was ranting on stages. But insurers and banks find it super difficult to adapt to these changes. And you have been very successful with that. What kind of tips do you have, decision makers?
Guy does not have any banking and insurance regulation. That's the difference. At one level, certainly, right? So I have much fewer legal requirements and regulatory requirements, but that may be half of it. The other half of it is that I am open to change. Indeed, I welcome change. And I'm not sure that that's true of everybody.
I think so too. I began my talks at the beginning, like 2017. I began my talks always, and if you feel offended by my talk,
Yeah.
I intended it. Just kidding. All right, but I'm actually a nice guy. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
You are you're an also investor, as I understand, evangelist, and I think in that capacity you have heard a lot of pitches from startups, not only innovation but also from startups. And there are also a lot of insurance startups around the world, service providers taking part of the value chain, or even full stack insurers. What excites you when? And I heard also a podcast where you talked about like some sort of presentations you are really annoyed by.
Yeah.
So what does it take to excite Guy Kawasaki when I pitch you something? And don't worry, I won't pitch you anything.
Well, I would. There's some sort of foundations, right? So first of all, I want this pitch to be short. I don't want any bullshit adjectives. I don't want to hear your story, your life story, because everybody's life story is made to sound interesting in a pitch. And so it doesn't really, whether you went to Harvard or Stanford or you have a PhD or what, well, my PhD in engineering counts, but I would say your educational background is interesting, but it's not the key. The key really for me is the product. And so when people pitch me, I just want to see the product. I mean, if I see the product and I like it, then I'm curious about your education and work experience. But if I see the product and it's crap, I don't care if you have a Harvard MBA and you work for Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or Accenture. It means nothing because your product is crap. So the key is, how great is your product?
It's super interesting because there's a theory and a movement, especially here in Europe, in tech startups, especially those startups that do actually a great tech job. And I only can talk about tech and insurance. I have no clue about anything else. But there are some really great tech people that have very good technology, like solving a real problem. I don't know, in reinsurance, direct insurance, relationship accounting, or something like that. But they put that in the center, and they try then now to become how should I put it, to change their story a little bit, or to sound a little bit more like like a typical pitch. So what you would say, if you have a great product, just show your product that you're solving an industry problem, and everything will come then.
Well, I think it's very important in a pitch that in the first 60 seconds, the audience understands what you do. Yeah. And that is not true in most pitches. Most pitches, people believe that, well, okay, so here's what happens. So many entrepreneurs, they read books, they go to conferences, and they listen to venture capitalists on panels. And every moderator of every venture capital panel asks the panel, what's your investment criteria? And every panelist says that I invest in people, which, if you think about it, is total bullshit, because at the time you had to invest in Apple or Cisco or Yahoo or Pinterest or Instagram or Facebook or Google. The team was not a great team. They were undergraduates. Maybe they were graduate students. They had no business background. They had not built anything before. And so, I don't think you can tell about a team at the point that they're pitching. And so when a venture capitalist says, I invest in the team, what the audience hears is, oh, so when I pitch this VC, I have to talk about the team first, because that's the most important. So they do all these gyrations about trying to prove they have a world-class team when it's total bullshit, because the fact is, if they're trying to raise early seed money, if they had a world-class team, they probably wouldn't be pitching you. So by definition, if they're pitching you, they don't have a complete team. So why are you trying to put lipstick on a pig and prove that you're something that you're not? And so they go through all these gyrations about, my family came over from Germany to America in the 1800s, and they settled in Connecticut, and they opened up the first grocery store. And then they were very successful. So they created a fellowship and and donated a building to Yale. And so I went to Yale, and after Yale, I interned at Goldman Sachs. And after Goldman Sachs, I went to Accenture. And after Accenture, I went to McKinsey. And all this time, I had a fascination with tech. And now I've started this company and like, I don't give a shit about your entire background. Just tell me what you do.
Okay. This is for sure one of the funniest.
Okay.
I totally feel you. I totally feel you. But let's. You said let's talk about tech. Let's talk about product. But you mentioned people. We are also very open always for interns. And since we have a big TikTok account, a lot of interns come to our company or a small company.
Mm-hmm.
And we are open for all ages, grades, background. If you have a bad grade, good grade, as long as you want to conquer the world, I actually really don't care. Yeah, it's I also received a lot of chances I probably didn't deserve at the time. So you had some interesting interns, and you had several ones, but one was super interesting. He was quite successful, I would say, a little bit at least. Mark Benioff.
Yes.
So how did that happen? And I still in contact.
Mark Benioff, I gave him his first job. He was a freshman at USC. And in the summer between his freshman and sophomore year, I gave him a job of writing assembly language programs in the Macintosh division, sample programs for Macintosh developers. By the way, I also gave Tim Kendall his first job. And Tim Kendall went on to become the person who figured out how Facebook could monetize its traffic. And then he became president of Pinterest. So it's good to be my intern.
Yeah, I have a little application here. I'm just kidding. Okay, we don't have this sort of success stories here, but I think it shows, I don't know, karma. I don't know what it does. Super interesting ecosystem there. Looking back at your current experience, but also looking back at your whole career, we have a lot of also young people in the insurance industries, young salespeople, or working for also and other great insurers. What would you recommend young people in the industry, which is not very tech focused yet? What do you recommend them?
Well, recommend them to what end? I mean, I need to know.
To be successful, to enjoy life, to build something great. I mean, I don't say to become the next Guy Kawasaki or the next Steve Jobs, but just to take some lessons and some fails.
I guess I have two pieces of advice. One is ultimately what's going to determine your success is your grit. That is how willing you are to work hard. There are plenty of smart people who are not willing to work hard. I guess there are plenty of dumb people who are willing to work hard too. But my point is, it's about grit. It's about attitude. The second thing I would encourage a young person to understand is that one of your goals in your career is to always make your boss look good. Yeah. The concept that I'm going to make my boss look bad, I'm going to show people that I'm better than my boss, and then I will be promoted above my boss. I have never, ever seen that work. So the way it works in the real world is as your boss progresses, you draft along behind him or her. So as she or he gets promoted, you also rise. And at some point you have enough experience, you step out and you go into some other industry, some other company. But the concept is I'm going to make my boss look bad, then I'm going to get his or her job. That never, ever works. So don't do that. Your job is to make your boss look good.
Yeah, and I believe in karma, and if you do something good, later something great happens, and if you do something bad, the funny thing is a lot of people who believe in these principles I met in university, and I don't see them around anymore. I don't know where they went. They're not at the meetings. All right, 3 quick questions. I know we have not a lot of time. 3 quick questions.
No problem.
I'm writing a book right now. I wrote some before, but they were scientific books, and outside my mom and my dad, probably only 2 people in the world read them. That's okay. They were meant for that. And you have written several global bestsellers. Any tips for me?
I think that the reason why people should write a book is not because they want to position themselves as a thought leader, a visionary, a guru, to increase their visibility, increase their wealth, increase their consulting, or increase their speaking. The reason to write a book is you have something to say. So if you don't have anything to say, don't write a book. I think that you should think of a book as an end in itself. That writing the book, the finished book, is a piece of art that you should be proud of. as opposed to, well, I'm only writing a book so that I can get more speeches and consulting, because inevitably that kind of book is crap. So that would be my top line advice to anybody who says, I think I should write a book.
Yeah, I put a lot of love in my PhD
Yeah.
again, but I'm not sure how many people read it from end to end. But I mean, I'm only 38 years old. But thank you for that. I think that's true. That, and it needs, I think, to be very practical. That people not only get rah from it, but like,
Yeah.
oh, how can I do tomorrow? That's not number one. Number two is we this year we interviewed in this show Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, and you. Who else do you think the insurance industry should be on this show?
Even above the three people that you just mentioned, myself included, I think the most useful person you could have on this show is Bob Cialdini. So Bob Cialdini is the author of a book called Influence. He's the godfather of influence and persuasion. And, you know, he's the man. That's who I would have on.
All right. Now, my last question I asked that everybody on our show is, you shared so much valuable insights to our audience, and you provided a lot of content. Is there anything the audience can do for you?
Well, what I would like them to do, and it's going to be mutually beneficial, is to go subscribe to my podcast, because I would think that the people who are listening to this want to be remarkable. And so my podcast, I don't want to overpromise, but can help you become remarkable, not because it's full of guyisms and spouting off my wisdom, but you will be able to collect insights from people such as Jane Goodall, Margaret Atwood, Ariana Huffington, Martha Stewart, Christy Yamaguchi, Steve Wozniak, Steve Wolfram, Steven Pinker. You know, I could just go on and on. So I have 70 people who are truly remarkable. And it's, as I said, 95% of the time they're talking, not me. So I like to tell people that, you know, I think I have as good a guest list as anybody in podcasting. And I tell people that think of my podcast. This is an American metaphor, so I don't know how well it'll translate, but think of my podcast as NPR without the pledge drive. That's what it is.
Yes, and it has a very special atmosphere. So I urge everybody to check it out. Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People podcast with some remarkable guests on it. And you for sure have been a remark. Yeah.
You know, for people who are in sales, for sure, they should listen to the Bob Cialdini episode of Remarkable People, because he talks about how to influence and persuade people. There is also another episode by Angela Duckworth. She's the MacArthur Award winner. She is an expert in grit, you know, perseverance. So that's a second, I would say, highly recommended episode. A third would be David Ocker. David Ocker, just as Bob Cialdini is the father of influence, David Ocker is the father of branding. So Ocker, Cialdini, Duckworth, that I have you covered. That's only 3 of the 70 episods, but once you listen to those 3, you'll want to listen to the other 67. There's no doubt in my mind.
As it happened to me. So, Guy, thank you very much. You for sure also have been a remarkable guest on our show. And thank you very much for everybody here also taking part. I don't know why you were so shy and did not, Guy, ask any questions. Sometimes we have like dozens, hundreds of questions today, not a lot. We once had but you are in a very good company. We had the chief of the German regulatory authority once, and we had like thousands of people watching, and nobody dared to ask a question. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't want to get a visit from you. All right, Guy.
Are most of your listeners in Germany?
No, 50% Europe, 25% US, 25% rest of the world. And I would say from the 50% Europe, again, 50% German. So 25% is in German speaking, like with Switzerland and Austria.
Well, last week I bought a Mercedes Metris just to help the German economy.
Thank you. We need it. Guy, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Pleasure's been all mine.